A very good morning to you indeed. Coming to you live here from Cape Town as this taxi strike continues on this Monday morning. Several moving parts to the story, but I want to begin our coverage at this hour with some breaking news coming to us from provincial police in the Western Cape. Someone has been killed at airport approach, and that's apparently after a motorist fired shots at assailants, pelting his vehicle with stones. The SAPS in the Western Cape, I'm just reading from the statement this morning, has now deployed a heavy contingent of police officials in response to minibus taxis that were blockading airport approach. You'll know from our coverage throughout the morning that we started at 7 o'clock by telling you about the heavy blockade that was leading to airport approach on the N2. So what happened in the early hours of this morning, according to this police statement, an individual was shot dead. 3 others were injured after a motorist was pelted with stones on that N2 airport approach. The driver, we're told, fired several shots. As a result, a death and those 3 injuries were recorded. A murder and attempted murder case now being investigated. The identity of this deceased person is yet to be determined, but the incident has further compounded efforts to keep that road clear and free-flowing. Several police deployments still in place in that area and in several areas around the city of Cape Town. So that is our breaking news story at this hour. 1 person shot and killed, a number of other people injured on that airport approach road on the N2 as a result of that blockade. That is, of course, a big developing story that we are tracking for you here on 405. Well, we continue to track a whole range of other issues insofar as the taxi strike is concerned. One thing I can tell you is if you need to be at the airport this morning, there is no way that you are getting there on the N2. The advice we're getting is to use Govan Mbeki or one of the other back roads to get to the airport. Several reports as well of flights leaving Cape Town International Airport pretty much empty. If people didn't stay at the hotel last night in anticipation of the taxi strike continuing this morning, it would have made it very difficult for you to get to the airport and to catch your flight on time. Of course, one of the other big important angles on the story that we're covering is around the impact on learners. 300,000 learners, almost 10,000 teachers unable to get to their posts at schools around the province. I'm going to bring in Sadtu's provincial secretary here in the Western Cape. Sibongile Kwazi joins us from our position. Sibongile, it's great to have you with us. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Very important to note for our viewers that we're standing here on a field on the side of one of the main roads here in Cape Town because it's been very difficult for us to find each other because of the traffic. But welcome. What can you tell us about the situation, not only in Cape Town, but around the province insofar as learners is concerned?
The situation is very bad. And for us, it's not only the learners, it's also the teachers, because their lives are also threatened. So as Sadtu, it means that we live in a divided society, because the instruction from the powers are that schools will not close, which means that it's safe for others to go to school while it is unsafe for others. And unfortunately, those who cannot access schools today are the poor.
So the decision from the Western Cape Education Department has been to close schools despite the threat to learners. And as you say, this threat is to learners only in particular areas in the province.
Yes, it's in particular areas. There has been a zoning of the areas. Others are red, while others are just white, which means that those areas that are zoned as red are the most unsafe areas, and unfortunately it's the working class areas.
So what happens now? I mean, what's the intervention from Sadtu? And of course, by extension, we're talking about what is the intervention from COSATU insofar as the taxi strike is concerned?
We met on Friday with all other unions, especially the public sector unions. And what we are saying is that there needs to be an intervention. A meeting needs to be called with Santaco, for instance, because their fight with the administration of the Western Cape should not spill over to the people of the province, because the only people who are affected by this are the poor working class. It's not those who own the means of production.
It speaks to the racial divide yet again in the province, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, because your white areas are safe, there's normal schooling, while in other areas it is just a volatile situation. And we have advised our members not to play heroes and heroines by getting into the line of fire, rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my next question to you. You know, for teachers and learners who live in those volatile areas, you know, what has been your advice? Do they go to school? Do they still try and get to class in this context? One person was killed this morning on the N2 approach. We know exactly how volatile the situation is.
The advice we have given to our members is, if they are aware that it is volatile in the areas in which they work, they must just inform their principals, and the principals in turn inform the subject managers that it's impossible to access the schools. Some of the teachers don't stay in the areas where they work. They are coming from safer areas, but they cannot put themselves in the line of fire.
Sibongile, we've been talking for the past year or so about recovery from COVID-19. You know, the education losses that we had under the pandemic. These matric learners that we have in 2023, they were in grade 9, grade 10 at the height of the pandemic, right? Does this impact that catch-up yet again?
Yes, it does. I'll make an example. The employer, that is WCED, has a program called the Back on Track. They had to call it off this Saturday because of safety concerns. So it's worrying for us that they were able to call off the program for last Saturday, yet they cannot inform the schools to close today, because the same safety concerns that they raised last Saturday are the same safety concerns that are still existing today.
Sibongile Kwazi, let me thank you for your time this morning. She is the Provincial Secretary of Sadtu, and of course the big takeaway from that conversation is that the racial divide in Cape Town is firmly in play as this taxi strike continues. There are particular areas that are safe, schooling is continuing, and then of course there is the largely black areas in Cape Town where schooling is just impossible. The situations in those areas are still incredibly volatile. Really questionable why the Western Cape Education Department has taken this decision that schooling continues in the light of the real risk to life involved with this taxi strike. Once again, a reminder to our viewers of our breaking news story in connection with the taxi strike. One person has been killed, 3 others injured after shots were fired on that airport approach road after a taxi was attacked and stoned on that road. It's one of the big stories we're tracking for you this morning on 405.
Certainly, it is a tale of two cities, isn't it, Michelle? Where on the one hand, we're faced with real adversity, people bearing the brunt of the strike, while it's business as usual for other people who lie on the other spectrum of that socio-economic divide. But for now, thanks very much indeed. We'll continue watching the story, as you mentioned, as it continues to unfold.